Thanks for tuning in. We're Ace Comicals. I have with me my co-host Rahul Jani and Leon Everett. I'm Greg Driver. Let's get started. Welcome guys to Ace Comicals number 28. I'm joined by the usual suspects. That is Leon and Ray. We made it. We made it to the second month of 2018. January's over. It felt like 1,000 years. Sat in my attic space reading comics by the light of my space heater because I'm freezing. Also, I do this by choice because it's nicer than having the actual lights on and feels like a candlelight or fire. But I digress, so let's move onwards. So what have you guys been up to?
This week is it's been very consumed by work, as you do, but also a bit of anime, a bit of fighting anime.
Fighting anime? Would that be Dragon Ball by any chance?
Yes, very much so. You could say it's Dragon Ball Fighters with a Z at the end. So we spoke about this briefly last week, but a bunch of us got a lobby together and we're playing until quite late on Friday, and it was good fun. Good fun checking out each other's squads and going head to head and learning. It felt like the good old Xbox Live days where we had have a big lobby and we'd just be playing Street Fighter for hours and hours. Yeah. But I'm not the only one, was I, Rahul?
Yeah, somehow I convinced myself to pick this up as well, and in the process, having only had it for like less than a week. I should point out this is like the first fighting game I've played in maybe a decade. Like I think the last one might have been Tekken Tag or something. But yeah, I picked this up and then immediately went out and bought a 6-button joypad, realised it wasn't for me, and I'm waiting for a fight stick to come in the post. So I dove right in. And following picking up Dragon Ball Fighters, I started watching Dragon Ball as well, which I gather is something that's been happening to a lot of people who've picked up this game because it's such a good introduction to one, fighting games, and two, the lore of Dragon Ball. So I feel like I'm not the only one.
Yeah, it's if you've never watched Dragon Ball or Dragon Ball Z, I guess it's a good primer and a way to sort of get you started on it, which is nice. It's like an entry point, a jumping on point, which we talk about a lot here. I picked this game up as well, and yes, I was part of said lobby that lasted until 2:30, 3 o'clock or something silly like that. That's when I left anyway. But it was great. I was like 11 years old again. Some of the conversations that you used to have, like I used to have with my little brother about Dragon Ball Z and stuff like that, about what characters would do against other characters and how that would play out and things, and it's all there in front of me now. I mean, there's been other Dragon Ball fighting games, but nothing as nicely polished as this. I think this is like, as far as Dragon Ball fighting games go, this has been the best one.
Yeah, I think the balance that it has between easy onboarding, so even if you've not really played much beat 'em ups like Rahul, it's easy. They've put a lot of good sort of auto combos and easy execution things in there, so you can quickly jump in even if you don't know who the hell anybody is. And then for us who sort of grew up with it, we just get to geek out over this realization of getting to play all these characters that we've like grown up loving, but in a way that feels super respectful and faithful to it. I think it's just the perfect intersection of all of that. They've really nailed it with this game, and it's early days for all of us so far, but it seems like it's lit a fire.
Indeed, it is lit. So, the other thing I've been doing this week is reading comics, obviously, by light of Space Heater, as I've mentioned already. It sounds depressing, but really it's not that depressing. It's actually something I do by choice. But anyway, straight into the stack, which brings me to my first book, which is a book called Vinegar Teeth, which was published on Dark Horse. So Dark Horse published this one. We have the writer Damon Gentry, artist Troy Nixie, a colorist named Guy Major, and the cover artist is Troy Nixie, so he's the main artist and cover artist for the cover I bought anyway. Now, Dark Horse website describes this as Lovecraft meets Lethal Weapon, which I can see that, yeah. It's a noir detective buddy story featuring an otherworldly eldritch beast that the world just decides to accept. It's a comedy set to the backdrop of a 1920s, 30s cityscape, like kind of, noir style. It's called Brick City, and we have this alcoholic detective called Artie. And the book actually opens with, you've got a scene of Artie sitting in court, like drunk out of his skull. And you also see, one of the first things you see in the book is this portal to this otherworldly plane open, and some crazy wretched beast land in the reservoir and then spit eggs everywhere. One of these eggs ends up being the namesake of the book, Vinegar Teeth. And yeah, it's just great fun. It's like, I think it revels in its own silliness, actually, as a concept, and I really like that. I like how silly it is, and that it knows it's silly. This creature, Vinegar Teeth, ends up getting involved in an undercover bust or sting operation that's going on that Artie is also part of, and Artie is somewhat upstaged by Vinegar Teeth, who happens to be nearby and eats the perp that they're after. And because of this, the city love him, hail him as a hero, and make him a cop. Like, no questions asked about his origin or about, like, his appearance or anything like that. Like this big, horrible tentacle beast thing just standing there on a podium next to the mayor, receiving a badge, and everyone's just cheering away. No one, it's like, no one's scared of him at all. And it's the way they do this with the artwork as well, because it's like this extreme caricature and expression type stuff. It's like gross out artwork. So you've got like close-up face panels showing, there's a great one actually sort of early on in the book, a close-up face panel that shows how drunk Artie is in court, with like various fluids leaking out of various holes on his face. And some of the interesting things they do in this book as well with speech bubbles, where they will reduce a sound or a smell simply to a picture of a skull or something like that, because it's got this whole kind of like gross out sort of overlay over the whole thing, which I really, really like. You read this as well, didn't you, Ray?
I did, yeah. I sort of read it. So I picked it up, flicked through it, and really dug the artwork. It's got this kind of like Steve Purcell, like 90s gross, bubbly comic cartoon style to it, which really vibed with me. But then I got into it first page, and immediately it's speaking my language, and that language is just an entire page of people saying blah, 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 blah. Like literally just blah. Like there's no actual words, it's just people spitting out speech bubbles that have blah, 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 which is exactly how I see an initial comic book page, which is just full of English words. So I like...
Oh, sorry. May I just interject there, actually?
Yeah.
I was going to say that first page, where it's all blah, 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 is interesting as well, because we know that the character whose eyes we are supposed to be seeing this through is drunk. So everything that's being said is probably passing right over his head anyway, and he's just sitting there vegging out with his hip flask, which is great.
See, I didn't catch that, but that makes a lot more sense now that you pointed it out. But yeah, I kept flicking through it, and I had this thing where I wasn't really like gelling with what was actually happening. So I got to the end of the comic, I was like, I didn't understand what happened in this weird ass comic. So I started again, and again, I didn't really take on the language and the words and stuff, and it wasn't really connecting. But I read it 3 times, so there's got to be something to it. And like, I like the thing that you mentioned about like they don't acknowledge what or who or why Vinegar Teeth is what it is. And it kind of it reminded me in a weird way of like Star Wars, but by way of Lovecraft. Because it's like, here's this guy here's this thing that's captured a bunch of criminals. Give him a medal and a job, just like apropos of nothing. It adds to the whole surreal vibe of the entire story, I think. I like it. I want to see where it goes, but I wish it had a bit more, maybe direction, or just maybe a synopsis to tell me what I was getting into, because like the character of Vinegar Teeth itself is kind of formless and hard to understand, so I didn't really always get an idea of what it was doing on a panel-to-panel basis. But apart from that, I thought it was pretty interesting.
But that's the whole point of the Lovecraftian design, isn't it? It's formless and difficult to understand and otherworldly. And like even the way Lovecraft used to write it, he used to write things as indescribable.
Yeah, it's weird because it works really well.
Yeah.
But it doesn't make me any less confused when I'm reading it.
I love this. Just for how bombastic and silly it was, to be honest. It's like, just because it's just so like... It's so... It revels in its own ridiculousness.
I admire how much it just dives into that, because everything is silly. The people are silly. The way they're presented is silly. Like the way that like everybody's outlines can just wobble and like royal, like they're being boiled in a pot kind of thing. Like I like that whole vibe, and to flip between all these very silly concepts with so much confidence is really cool. I think I need to give it a few more to like really make my mind up on it. I didn't love it, but I definitely liked it.
I've added it to my standing order already. So
nice.
Yeah.
Who's it by? Sorry?
Dark Horse Comics, and the writer is a fella named Damon Gentry. Artist is Troy Nixie. Colorist is Guy Major. I think it's a great first issue, and I think it's a great opener into the world that it seeks to present and seeks to describe. It is kind of like a waking dream / nightmare in the way that when you read through it, it has that kind of quality to it, that it's because it's so madcap and because it's so I can understand why you might feel that some of it feels disjointed and disconnected when you're reading it, Ray. I can totally see that, like in a waking dream kind of way. But I actually, like, upon reading it and then putting it down and then thinking about it and then flicking through it a second time without actually reading it, just flicking through the pages just to get another sense of the events and in which order they take place, I actually, connecting the dots is actually really easy, and it's actually a really simple story.
Yeah, to be fair, I'm not saying that it's like an entire negative against a thing.
Yeah.
The fact that it even made me go back and skim through its pages a couple of times to get a sense of the progression is actually, I think that's a pretty good plus in its favor. Also, one of the things that I loved about it was that it gave me an excuse to use silly French voices out loud. Because there's au revoir, silly cop. Like anything that gives me an excuse to do that in the comfort of my own private room. That's cool.
Oh, you do that too, do you?
Yeah, of course. Who doesn't? Right? That's the whole point of reading comics by yourself in a dark room.
Yeah, I used to do that with Gambit in X-Men comics. I used to read in his Cajun accent.
It's terrible, and we should probably stop.
Yeah, I know.
But then if you put it in, especially written phonetically to be a silly French voice, I'm going to say it out loud.
Yeah. Not that French voices are actually silly, but So I guess bringing up X-Men moves me on to my second book. So this is one that I read. I don't know if you don't think either of you guys picked it up, but I was into this because it's the resurgence of a long-time X-Men character. He is the son of Charles Xavier, and he's had his own TV show.
Hang on, which comic is this?
This is David Harlow. This is Legion.
Legion, right? Okay. Yeah.
So he's the son of Charles Xavier. He's had his own TV show recently, and now he's got a comic again. And it's a short but sweet thing because I think it's only a 5-parter. Yes, it is only a 5-parter, and so just a little bit of background in case some of you may not know who Legion is or may not. He's the son of Charles Xavier. He's a powerful mutant with multiple personalities. Each personality is another dangerous mutant power as well. So he's from one to the next, he's a completely different quantity. A new personality in this book has manifested and is seeking to take over his body by consuming all the other personalities. And this is David trying to seek help from a renowned psychotherapist with demons of her own, named Hannah Jones, who is a super successful young girl who grew up on an East London council estate, according to the comic, and she's now a famed psychotherapist to the stars. And most of it focuses on this first issue focuses on David's journey across different across the US, to try and reach this psychotherapist, and his attempts to communicate with her before getting to her using his psychic powers. The art is really minimalist, which I think is quite cool, and flat colours with considered use of lines actually helps, because I can see how a more detailed art style with this book would probably just overcomplicate the panels, especially with some of the things that are going on and some of the things that they're trying to get across and put forward. So somebody talking to himself, for example, and multiple personalities manifesting in different ways, be that via hallucination or in a mirror or something like that, could get quite confusing if it weren't so... I can see how it would get quite confusing if the book were more... add more to realism, I guess, is the way I can put it. It is definitely a good aesthetic choice for a book like this, and I like the way, actually, that his multiple personalities are handled. Each one has a vocal quirk, or a quirk with a speech bubble, or an accent, or a language. Again, going on what Ray was saying about French accents, one of his personalities speaks French. So it's kind of like a similar thing there, where they write it out in French or with a French accent. It makes it nice and easy to follow, to understand who's talking when, because obviously with these like different personalities in his head, when there's a conversation going on with David and himself, or David and one of his other personalities, you've actually got a way to differentiate who's talking when, because there's a different quirk with each speech bubble, or a different accent, or a different language in some cases. And it's a really nice touch. And the story is quite a fresh feeling about it in the way that it handles the mental illness, because I know in some books or in some media, when madness is presented, it's presented in a certain way, a certain fashion, when mental illness is presented in media, and I think it kind of misses the point, because it's like the sort of stereotypical "I'm crazy" trope, like the sort of disjointed giggle and things like that go with it and everything else. But the way this does it is like it's fresh in the way that the way it handles his mental illness, and each one of these personalities is presented as a different person, and that he actually just wants to seek help, and he just wants respite from it all. And he doesn't want to hurt people. It's not the stereotypical comic depiction of crazy, in inverted commas, if I can say that. And I think it's really good, and I'm excited, and I'm also a little bit sad that it's only going to be 5 issues long, to be honest. And I recommend that you two probably pick it up.
Do I need to have watched, or like, for example, we've talked about how I haven't watched the Legion TV show. Would that be necessary to get into this comic, or would reading this first be better? Would help me segue to the TV show, if anything.
I would read the book, because the TV show is while it's based on like Legion from the books and all that, it's very much a Noah Hawley show doing its own thing in ways. It's not, you won't recognise the book watching the show.
Yeah,
right. Okay.
And you won't recognise the show reading the book, if I would put that vice versa, because this book as well, actually, one of the alt covers for it was basically the promo work for the artwork for the TV show. So if you've ever seen a poster or any promo artwork for the TV show, that was the front cover of the comic, the alternate cover. But
that's cool.
I mean, I guess when you open the book, if you buy it off having watched the TV show, when you open this book, there's going to be a big disconnect, because it's not anything like the show in that way, I don't think. It doesn't.
I assume this one's going to be more sort of X-Men / comic-y AF, while the show was more its own sort of island.
Yes, yeah, indeed, yeah. The show goes in a certain direction, I believe, and presents things in a certain way, and has a certain aesthetic and air about it that this won't have. So, I mean, you can read one independent of the other, Ray. You don't need to have... you don't need to know one to know the other. And also, you don't need to know anything about Legion to pick this book up either. You don't have to have read other Legion X-Men stories, or you don't have to have... you don't have to know the history.
Okay, that's encouraging.
Cool. Yeah.
Yeah, because the thing that stuck out to me, the thing that makes me want to pick it up is how you said it has a more nuanced depiction of mental illness than you normally find in comics.
Yeah.
Is it trying to be maybe not educational, but is it trying to have that kind of thing where it's teaching? I don't know if teaching is the right word. Trying to pull away from these very one-note depictions of mental illness by having a bit of, what's the word you use, Leon? Like didactic writing to it?
Yes.
Is that the kind of thing it's going for?
It has that a little bit. Like there's some lines in it where they refer to different disorders. With when like somebody's having a conversation with the psychotherapist, and she's like, "Oh, we haven't called it that since the mid-90s," or something like that. You know.
Oh, okay.
So it is kind of doing that in a way, and I like that it's doing that. I like that it's actually got this this less stereotypical, more balanced view of mental illness, and I think it's a good thing.
Because that sounds cool.
Because I mean, there's a lot of misunderstanding of mental illness that goes on in the world. I think a lot of people misunderstand what it means to suffer from such a disorder or such a, you know. I think
conflating different issues or putting lots of things under the same umbrella. And,
exactly.
Yeah, there's a lot of misinformation,
especially with like David Haller's sort of his condition, where it's very big in sort of genre stories to play on the whole like DID, dissociative identity disorder, as like a character trope, because you get to split the personality of a character and examine them mentally. But because it's been such a crutch, there's a lot of just general nonsense, and that feeds into the general stigma that we as a society have to people with varying ranges of mental illness. So it's one of those awkward things where with these characters who have these things historically, it's interesting now to like delve in and put a new like modern lens on there, where it's not just, oh, this person's crazy. Instead, it's more getting into the minutia, or adding extra details and putting a human face on it, because at the end of the day, it's still going to be a comic book story.
Yeah.
But it's interesting to sort of go back to a character who has historically, this is part of them, and from what it sounds like, take a different angle to look at it.
And I don't know if you found this as well previously, but other when there's been depictions of mental illness previously in comics or in other media, it's always been that the sufferer has been adverse to help, or has fought help instead of seeking it, which in this he's actually seeking help. So I quite like that. Moving on from there, I will go into a book named Abbot, which is published by Boom Studios. This is one that we were excited about on the cast. Actually, it's one that we've sort of talked about in previous episodes as something that we're looking forward to, or as something that has made the pull list. And the writer is Saladin Ahmed. The artist is a Sami Kivela, and the cover artist for his first issue is a Ty Tenfold. I'm not sure if I'm saying that right. Taj. So is that Ty?
Could be Taj.
Sorry if we've got your name wrong. This book is I think it's one that all three of us read, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yes, indeed.
and the best way to describe this is that it centers around a black female reporter in the 1972 civil rights era, Detroit. Reporter's name is Elena Abbot, and she has been called to a mutilated horse at a mounted police paddock as part of her job as a reporter. She's been sent there to sort of get the scoop and take photos. And you instantly get the sense of what she does and what she is as a reporter, in the fact that she's having to push back and fight back against the sort of establishment and the established way of doing things, in the way that as soon as she walks into, when we see in the comic panels, as soon as she walks into the barn, every other reporter is a white male and wants to blame the Black Panthers for what's happened, even though this is not their MO at all, according to other characters in the book. And actually there's something else about this mutilated horse, something almost supernatural, which is then we learn more about that later in the book. So, and I don't want to spoil it, so I'm not going to talk too much about that. I love the way that this book opens, in the way that it sets the scene. The first page, it's kind of like it's strange because it's like a collage of newspaper articles and imagery, sort of setting the scene of 1972 Detroit, and also setting the mood with what some of these articles are. And you've got some of these articles fictional, because it's articles that are written by Eleanor Abbott, the main character of the story. And although she's a reporter, she actually behaves more like a hard-boiled detective, which I really like about this as well. And she has this obsession with routine, which I think is going to become important later on, because it's something that, in her words, keeps out the chaos. And she's like this really tough sort of hard-boiled reporter, and I like it. I really do like it. So what are your thoughts on this, guys? Ray?
Yeah, to go back to that initial opening page that you mentioned, where it's the collage of her newspaper articles, I really like that the way it's presented. It's like this symmetrical, angular thing, which could almost be like an insignia for a superhero if it was a superhero comic. And it's got the letters MI for Michigan with what looks like a roadmap in the middle. It's just really clever. I like what it is, but we don't see that again, like this kind of panel construction, like very abstract type collection of imagery, which I'd like to see more of. But again, it's just page one.
I think it's.
I'm fully.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I'll let you.
No, go ahead.
Oh no, I was going to say I think it's just like an interesting introduction device to have.
I hope they do that in future issues, like just to set the scene or to set the tone or something, because that really drew me in straight away. But yeah, like you were saying, I really dug the character. I like everything that it's doing. I like these little touches where, like you said, she walks into a room and 5 other white reporters just stare at her, and they've all got a glare on their faces, and you really get a sense of what she's going through as she's walking through this world which is she's constantly battling people because she's a woman and because she's black and because she's a black woman. It kind of colors every conversation and every interaction that she has.
Everything she does in the book, every time she interacts with a member of the public, bar probably 2 or 3 interactions, it seems to be it's a fight. It's altercational. If I can say that word, is that a word?
I get what you mean. And even when she's talking to other women or other people of color, it's still a topic. It's still a thing that comes up. And I'm not sure if that's part of just what the world was like back then and what it can still be like now in some ways, or whether it's slightly ham-fisted writing. I've not really made my mind up on that. I'd like to give it another read before I settle on how I feel about that.
Yeah. I've not really seen or read much other media that centers around this kind of point in time from this kind of point of view. So I don't really know Whether, as you say, if it is ham-fisted writing or if it was actually like that or not, I don't know. I mean, I know, obviously, I know enough, but I don't know enough at the same time, if you get what I mean. She writes the truth and she prides herself on it, which is another thing that I like. And like, even against the wishes of her bosses and things, she just always pushing back, and that's what I enjoyed about it.
Pushing back in defense of her community as well, because people want to seem to portray it in a bad light, which is very apropos of the time, I guess. One of the things I wanted to point out that I loved about this comic was there's one particular page where she's fallen into a dream, and it turns black and white with like a splash of color, and I adored that whole sequence that happens in that page. I don't want to spoil what it is and why, but I love the artwork in this book.
That was very good, and the artwork is very nice. Leon, did you read this one?
Yeah, I did, and I echo a lot of the sentiments you guys have had. It has this nice mix of like a good 70s detective story, and then because of like who the character is, it has like shades of like a blaxploitation drama, but minus the salaciousness or like revenge angle, which is quite nice. But I think it's a great introduction into an interesting area, and it takes what's like a general sort of story. You get a bunch of films like this, but it adds like this extra sort of genre tinge onto it, which is quite nice. It does feel like a good mix of, and I think these were probably inspirations, but like Kolchak the Night Stalker, that TV series, or like more modern in some ways, like The X-Files, in terms of someone who is like just dogged and trying to get to the bottom of what's going on and the truth. And like it paints like a real feeling world, and it sets up character relationships, character pasts and histories and character quirks in quite an economical but interesting way. Like, it doesn't feel like the world began on page one for us. It feels like we've dropped in, and it starts off as business as usual, and then things start to take a turn, and like the world feels living and breathing as she speaks to people from different areas, different communities in the city, and how all the complexities of, like, how it presents the complexities of the post-civil rights era and all these inherent tensions in the 70s, especially in a city like Detroit, with because I believe this is at a time when white flight was happening, and a lot of white communities were leaving the city for the suburbs, and then the sort of urban centre was more African American, and then with that you got sort of the standard things you get with these, where it's like less investment in things, and then you end up with a high crime rate, and then the motor city sort of loses its industry, and it just becomes as it is now, like a dead city in ways. And you can sort of see the beginnings of that here, which is done really well. It does seem really well researched, and I really like the sort of presentation of how you get a very real sense of social segregation that you generally, in fiction, you generally more see like southern based, while all that stuff was still happening in the north, like New York, Chicago, Detroit. So I like how it's presented, and there's like a line which I'll like half quote, where it's like there are two Detroits, one white, one black, and there's this general sense of change has been forced through in the last decade with civil rights movement and the passing of things like the Voting Rights Act and a few other things, which have generally pushed the needle back. And at the same time, you're having in the 60s, you were having the feminist movement. So a lot of those things are pushed, and then they're we're here at the intersection of a character who is a black woman. She's trying to exist in a white man's world. And I think it does it really well. Like, I think, going to the point you were saying about the dialogue, I think the dialogue is, like, it feels like it's research. It doesn't feel like impostery. But because you get so much of it up front, because it's the first issue of a comic book, you are kind of left with, like, how sincere is this? And I think it's definitely coming from a place of sincerity, and I think it's something that will read better the more issues there are. But because we're getting introduced to the world, we're getting the sort of front page of everyone. But there really was, and still is, but there really was this constant contention, because, like, at any time, like, cops would be coming in and there'd be police brutality. Certain crimes against people of color just weren't investigated properly, and it was a time of, like, great unrest, like, politically, but also socially. So I think it is dumping you in there, and in ways, because we're looking at this with 2018 eyes, it almost feels like, okay, we get it, but I can see what's being done there, and I'm giving it the benefit of the doubt. But it really is nice to sort of have this character who, while they are, like, a black woman, and that is a point of contention for other characters around, I do like this character does feel fully formed and not like this, like, avatar or anything like that, and has her own strengths and weaknesses, and like, she's not like this super feminist superhero, which would be fine, but instead she's got this cool sort of nuance to her, because there'll be times where in the past where I'll complain on the podcast about how the first issue, like, there's nothing there, and I don't mean that fully disparagingly, but it's like, in these 30 pages or so, like, I've just got to take it on faith. Like, I don't feel like the world's been constructed properly, and characters are talking in a way that is so fast that I'm just like, how are they at this point already? I don't really feel invested yet. I feel like this comic doesn't really have that issue for me. Like, the first issue I kind of feel like confident in what the comic is in a way, while knowing there's other mysteries and such. And I think that it's a good combination of, like, Ahmed's writing and Cavella's illustrations, where they've managed to pull us into this world. And I guess part of that maybe is because it's a historical piece set in the past, and in real life, well, sort of in real life. So there's a lot to draw on, where you already have sort of that built-in, like, in terms of world building, it's not like they need to introduce what the laws of physics are in this world or anything like that. But I don't know, it felt like getting to the end, I didn't feel like, okay, I've had half a comic. I did get a thing of, okay, this is chapter 1. I'm interested to see what happens in chapter 2. So I quite liked it, and I'm looking forward to seeing where it goes.
It feels complete.
Yeah, just to follow that, issue. Like, I hit page number 24 and thought it was a double spread issue. Like, I thought I'd read twice that much. It was quite dense, but not cloyingly so. Like, I didn't feel frustrated by the end of it. I wanted more. But like you said, I feel like it has fully fleshed out this world. I'm surprised at how much exposition it got across without sounding ham-fisted. So I think the little instances that were just stuck out to me.
Yeah, and I think that's just because of the time that it's trying to depict. As we said,
maybe.
And because I think, as Leon said, it is coming from a sincere place, and I'm really into this story. I'm really invested now, actually, just after the first issue. And I know we say this a lot, but this is something that I can see being adapted to TV as well, you know.
Yeah, definitely. Like, the opening page you guys are talking about with the cool image, cool panel layout, that is like the comic book representation of the over opening credits sort of montage you'd get, and we'd get all these shots of like 70s Chicago, the streets, the buildings.
Yeah.
We might even get some news reports and like TV reports mixed in. It feels like that, and you'd have like a 70s hit, probably like Motown or something, playing over the intro as the names come up. Like I got that just from looking at the page.
Or it actually reminded me, like made me think of, you know, when you see some old films where they show you the headlines in the press and you can see the printing press going in the background and it just flings the headlines at the TV screen kind of thing with the dramatic music going in the background. Yeah. That kind of feel as well. But yeah, I get what you mean. Yeah. You can imagine that. And I think it would work quite nicely as a TV show, that one. So if anyone's looking for a property to pick up and adapt into a new TV show that people will love, there you go. Moving on from there is another one that I read, and I'm not going to talk about this too much because I've talked about it a lot previously as a comic, and it's another one that kind of has like a 70s air about it, but in a different way, in a grindhouse, gritty, violent sci-fi way. And it is called Space Riders, Galaxy of Brutality. And we have issue 4, which is the conclusion of this arc, which we've been waiting for a while. And I'm glad because it's fantastic. Such a ride, such a joyride is this comic. It's hyper violent, hyper vivid, beautifully psychedelic, and it is an epic conclusion to the story. It's as I've said, it's like sci-fi with a filthy grindhouse flavour, and it has this real gritty, violent toughness about it, which, coupled with the utterly ridiculous and concepts that it brings up, like utterly out there, and you know, borderline indescribable in their scale concepts that this book plays with. It's fantastic, and the final battle and the way it's all illustrated is just so beautiful, with all this like all of these like popping neon colours on a black background, because we're in the backdrop of space. We're in space, and there's all these like sort of popping high, you know, like neon blues and yellows and pinks and reds, and it's just absolutely gorgeous. I just love it. It's so psychedelic and such a fun read. And that is Alexis Ziritt and Rangel Junior Ferrier. They're your guys on this book. Rangel Junior is the writer and Ziritt is the artist. And it's Ziritt's artwork that I love so much. It's just these fantastic bold black lines in this really kind of old school style, but with like all of these kind of flash psychedelic colours and the gritty overtones and everything else, and just how completely just the scale of it, just how completely vast it goes. It's great.
Yeah, the art looks really, really cool.
It is. It's a real joyride. It's a real trip. Definitely one to pick up. I love this book, and I hope they continue on and bring us some more. But I don't know if the way this ends, I don't know if they can carry on from there, if there's anywhere they can go. But I hope they can, because definitely bittersweet reading that, definitely. And that was Space Riders, Galaxy of Brutality, which I'm sure will soon be out in trade. So you guys should definitely pick that up. And that is Black Mass Comics. And I guess that brings us on to our final book, which is one, again, that we've all been looking forward to and that we've all wanted to read for quite a while since we've learned of its existence. And this is another one published on Dark Horse. This is the first, one of the first titles to come onto the Berger Books imprint, which is Karen Berger, who she was kind of the founder of Vertigo Comics, wasn't she? And now she's moved on to do this. And this is a book called Hungry Ghosts. The writer is a chef by trade, Anthony Bourdain. And Ray, I believe this one was this one was one that you were very much looking forward to and brought to our attention. So do you want to take the lead on this one?
Yeah, sure. So this is one that we both talked about in episode number 26 as something we were looking forward to in 2018. So Hungry Ghosts number 1, as you said, written by the chef Anthony Bourdain and Joel Rose. I don't know if he's a chef, but definitely a writer. Artist for this is Alberto Ponticelli, and I think Alberto did the art for 2 of the stories in this anthology book, and there was also Vanessa Del Rey who did the final story. Colors are by Jose Villarrubia, letters by Sal Cipriano, and the cover art for this one is by Paul Pope. So we went over this before in episode 26 about how it's an anthology series all based around the Japanese parlour game of Hyakumonogatari Kaidankai, which they go on to explain in this book. But it's essentially a series of horror stories, and what Anthony Bourdain and Joel Rose have done with this one is take this concept and apply it to food. So it's going to be reimagined classic stories of monsters, spirits, and transformed beings, all tainted with this common thread of food. So what we get in this one is the initial framing device of a Russian mobster who's introduced or has hired 8 chefs to host a party for him. And then at the end of the meal, he brings in this concept of the Kaidan game, where you walk into a room full of 100 candles, tell a scary story, and then after you finish telling the story, you look into a mirror that just to double check that you haven't been overtaken by a spirit, and extinguish 1 candle, and you do this over and over again, and as the room gets darker and darker as all the candles go out. So in this one we get basically 2 initial stories, one of which is the Starving Skeleton, a cautionary tale about helping the needy, and the Pirates, about a woman who's been thrown into the sea and then rescued by pirates, and what they want from her in return for their rescue. So it's going to be an anthology series, and what I really liked about this was, like, again, talking about initial opening pages, because I'm a sucker for really good opening pages. This one is a cracker. Like, it's basically a demon woman who is addressing the audience, addressing the reader, and explaining, do you know what the Hyakumonogatari Kaidankai is? And she's sat in her robe with her scary fingernails and lipstick, and in the mirror you can see her true reflection as a like demonic entity, as she's surrounded by all these candles and like traditional Japanese horror masks and, you know, skulls and all this other arcane stuff around her. It's really cool. Like, what did you guys think of it?
I really liked it, and yeah, that first page was fantastic. It's like the creepy spirit kind of inviting you into the book. I love it, and I love the fact that she's a recurring design throughout panels in the book. So she just pops up here and there in different panels, and I think she's going to become more important later on. It's an anthology of short horror stories, but the connection being the players of the game. The artwork in the first story is nice in its realism, but when I compare it to other books, it's quite standard for this day and age, I believe.
I think that initial page is a little bit misleading in some ways, because I agree with that. I think the rest of it is a little bit I think pedestrian might be a bit too harsh, but it's standard comic fare.
Yeah, it's what you've come to expect. And what you were saying about the chefs, just to harken back to that, I think actually, I mean, you get the idea that he might have gotten his money through less than savoury actions, but I don't know if he's a mobster per se or just an oligarch. And
right,
yeah, and you've got the other members of the sort of like the chefs and everything else. He won a charity bid. So they were bidding on the chefs for charity, so it's like a charity thing.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
Right.
So they were like, you know, I think is the idea anyway. And I mean, some of the artwork in the first story, especially towards the end of the first story, when we get to see, I'm not going to spoil it. And some of the use of onomatopoeia is actually quite interesting. I quite like it. And I will say this for the artwork, as although it is pretty standard fare, I believe, for this day and age where comics are concerned, there's some really nice work with shadows and things like that. And the way they put shadow into it. So, I
agree.
Yeah, I love the way that the stories are divided. So before the introduction to each story, you have a splash page, which is a bunch of tea lights against a black background. I don't know if you did. What your thoughts on that are?
Oh, and the
sort of dividers between each page. Yeah, the story breaks.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's
I
like
quite like that. Yeah,
like really grainy photograph. And then the subtitle underneath it. To touch back on what you said about onomatopoeia, I think one of the things I really liked about this first story, what was it called? The Hungry Skeleton, the Starving Skeleton. It uses Japanese onomatopoeia, but written in English. So Gachi Gachi, which means like teeth chattering, like in the cold. I like that touch. I hope they do more of that kind of thing, because that's one thing that I was fascinated with when reading manga back when I was studying Japanese, was just how abstract onomatopoeia is when you don't know the language that it comes from. It's like we have so many onomatopoeias in English which sound really obvious, and we should, we inherently learn what they mean, but there's so many in Japanese which are repeated sounds, like gachi gachi, guru guru, furu furu, all those kind of things.
Doki doki, and that kind of stuff.
Doki doki, yeah. If you don't know what it is, then I guess you don't know what it is, and this is going to be another reason to dive back into one of those websites which has a compendium of all of the sound effects in Japanese. So that was cool.
In fact, actually, if you've got that website, it might be interesting to put that into the show notes.
Yeah, it's the jadednetwork.com /SFX.
Yes. What I enjoyed about the fact, like you mentioned, they were putting the Japanese onomatopoeia in there, and the sort of the way the horror is framed, because it is very Japanese horror stories as well. They're very Japanese style horror stories in the fact that it's things that things in Japanese horror stories that people that are creepy, and that are, the creepiness is done very differently. Like the noise of chattering teeth isn't something you'd associate with Western horror, for example. But when you think about the noise of chattering teeth, it's actually really unsettling. Yeah. And it's a really, really nice way to kind of get a rise out of your reader, I think.
I do like this whole thing about a specific monster to punish a specific crime as well. Yeah.
And the noise of chattering teeth sort of creeping up on him as he walks through the streets. I love it.
Yeah. Which makes which has like double or even triple meaning when you see the reveal. So I don't want to spoil that.
The second story, the artwork is very it's almost like an oil painting. It's like painted or chalk.
Well, this is the one that was done by Vanessa Del Rey, as opposed to the previous, which was Alberto Ponticelli. And
I love the sort of the bold lines on it, and I think the artwork very much fits the aesthetic that they're going for with the pirates and the time that they're trying to depict. I really do like it. And the story itself is quite amusing as well, especially towards the end.
Not as much grotesque horror as I was kind of expecting from this story.
Yeah.
But nonetheless, still pretty entertaining and cringeworthy in the best way.
Definitely. Yeah, I love it. So in short, for the first two stories, I think this is very good, and I think it's a very good book. And I'm quite impressed with it, actually. I was quite impressed with the artwork, especially in the second... Well, I was impressed with the artwork, especially in the second story. And I was impressed with the way that they... it's kind of like a moral or allegorical edge to it as well, isn't there? Yeah.
And I guess what they're doing is they're taking these established monsters, like these classical stories from Japanese mythology, and bringing them into the modern day. And I'm all for that. Like I like anything which reintroduces me to a different culture's understanding of a genre. And so I'm hoping that I'm assuming they will continue with that. So I'm on board for this.
And the other reason that I like the second story is because Vanessa Del Rey is the artist on Redlands as well.
Oh no way! Really?
And that kind of shows in the way this story plays out, actually.
Cool.
Because it's the kind of thing that I could see happening in a Redlands comic, which I really like. Yeah, it's great.
Yeah, I agree with what you guys have said. I think the concept is really, really cool, and touching on what you guys were saying regarding it being sort of a good sort of mix between like the West and East, I think it handles that stuff in an interesting way, where like sometimes you can run into issues with that where it just feels like cultural tourism, but it feels like there's an affection and a level of research that has been put into the stories. So it'll be interesting to see how they build that up into whatever they're building it up into. I'm not 100% sure on how I feel about it so far, because I do think that the setup is really cool, and having people come up one by one to tell the stories and blow out. I think that framing device is creepy in a very good way. Though for the first issue, it feels quite broad. Like, I mean, as it's necessary that the stories are mega short, but they feel like, with a lot of like horror stories and such, it feels like there's usually a bit of a done reveal, and the ones with this don't really feel like, they just feel like, and then this crazy thing happened. It doesn't really feel like lined up as well with the main theme of the story in a way. Like, it does, but in a very broad way. So yeah, I'm hoping future stories are a bit more, I don't know, not really innovative, but a more interesting, I guess. Like the twists and turns are a bit more seeded in the theme of the story. But,
sorry, continue.
No, I was just going to say, because like, they're cool like nuggets of ideas, but they don't really feel. They feel like they just happen.
No, I do agree with that. And while it doesn't make for an excellent book overall, I think it kind of works in the context of the story. If only because, imagine if you were one of these chefs who's been dragged out and suddenly been made to tell a horror story. And like, the first guy's like, I guess there was a guy who refused to help a guy in need, and then the guy died. Like that whole bum. I think it kind of works in this context. I'm not really defending it. I liked that it was so short and stupid in its own way.
Yeah, having to riff something on the fly. Yeah.
And especially as the stories are supposed to get more and more creepy as they go along.
Yeah.
Which, again, it's not an amazing way to tell. It's not an amazing way to construct a book, because you want everything to be interesting from the get-go. But if this was real life and you wanted to tell like a basic story, that would be one of the first type to come up, I think.
Especially if you were put on the spot and made to go first and had to think of something on the fly.
Yeah.
Which
maybe we're defending it falsely, but like, it's an interesting point to bring up. And one of the things that we haven't mentioned is, because Anthony Bourdain, being a chef, I can really feel like he's in the framing device where it's all the chefs hanging around after having finished their meal, are just hanging around smoking and chatting shit about the kind of people that they've served in the past. I feel like that must be drawing from personal experience, and that's kind of nice to see.
100%, yeah, definitely. And so, does anybody have anything else left to say?
No, not on any more comics. I've read all the comics.
Have we exhausted our collective stack?
For this week, yeah,
I believe we have. So now we can move on to what we're looking forward to in the future, as in next week and the week after in Rahul's case. And this is the pull list. So, Ray, what's on your pull list?
Right, so previously mentioned something called Twisted Bromance in our episode number 26. Something to look forward to. So it's, again, anthology stories about tales of romance gone wrong. It sounds interesting. So this is going to be a weekly one. So there'll be one out on the 7th of Feb when this episode is airing, and there'll be one the week after as well. And then also on the 7th of Feb, we've got Met Cadet U number 6, which is returning after a hiatus. And then there's also something called Songs for the Dead, which is by Vault Comics, which is a relatively new publishing company, which I've been keeping my eye on lately. And I don't know anything about this, apart from the fact that the cover has a woman holding a lantern at the edge of a cliff, there's a flying squirrel ghost, and then a kid standing behind them with an arrow in his eye. So, it's got all the elements that I'm looking forward to. And then, so for the week after, 14th of Feb, there's the new Kick-Ass run, there's the new Lockjaw, and there's also Mr. Miracle Director's Cut number 1 coming out, which I'm not 100% sure how I feel about the Director's Cut stuff, but I do want to see what they... In this particular comic, I want to see the behind-the-scenes stuff, so I probably will pick that up.
So mine are all for the 7th of February. I haven't gone that far into the future yet, but these are all things that I'm looking forward to from the 7th of February. So we have the second issue of Exit Stage Left, the Snagglepuss Chronicles, which is very, very good. And once I've read issue 2, I believe I'll be in more of a position to discuss it on the podcast, which I really want to do because it's a very good book. Scales and Scoundrels number 6, which every time one of these comes out, I love it. It's just a really nice, just a brief, however many page jump into a gorgeously illustrated world that is so different from our world and is a really nice little escape. I love that book. There's one I'm looking forward to, which is called Verses, which starts next week, and that is on Image Comics. Next week being 7th of February, which is when this actually releases. So yeah, we've got Verses number 1 on Image Comics, which is a kind of like it's a book set in the future where soldiers are kind of like reality show superstars, I think is the best way to put it. And people watch them for entertainment. People watch wars for entertainment. Find a better description for you guys, actually better than... So yeah, war has become a spectator sport. This is directly from the Image website. Privately funded armies of superstar soldiers march into battle for fame and profit, and the glory of their sponsor nations. When a new generation of soldiers arrive, top gladiator Sata Flynn is about to discover how fleeting the limelight can be. From writer Ivan Brandon, who is responsible for Black Cloud and Drifter, and superstar artist Esad Ribrich, which is artist from Secret Wars and Uncanny X-Force, in his creator-owned Image debut, with painted colour by Nick Klein, Drifter and Viking, and graphic design by Tom Muller. Versus delivers a spectacular action, darkly humorous satire, and explores our hunger for fame and our penchant for self-destruction. So I'm looking forward to that one. And I will be picking up issue 1 on Wednesday. We've also got the Swamp Thing Winter Special, which I believe should have been out last week, but I think it got delayed. So it's on this week's pull list. So we'll see if I manage to get that. Infinity Countdown starts. Infinity Countdown with Adam Warlock. So this is going to be part of Marvel's big new Infinity event. They're doing something else to do with Infinity. I'm not quite sure what it is, but they've got this big comic event coming in. So I'll be looking forward to picking that up and starting to read that. And there's also the next trade paperback for the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles ongoing. So if you're following the trades, Trade 18 is out on the 7th of February. And that wraps up my pull list. Leon, anything on your list?
The net is vast and infinite. Yeah. I just stick my finger into the Ethernet port on my router, and it all comes to my mind.
And the one thing that I wanted to point out is how I tend to look forward to the week after to pick out things for the interim period. What we have been trying to do lately is be more robust with our Twitter feed and mentioning things that we're looking forward to on there. So if you are interested in hearing, between episodes, the things that we're keen to buy for the next New Comic Book Day, or even on the morning of New Comic Book Day, check our Twitter feed, which is at Ace Comicals, and we'll have everything that we like up there.
Yeah, this isn't by any means the full pull list. So usually we'll put the full pull list onto the Twitter feed, or maybe even on the Instagram actually as well, because we do that with Instagram now. We have a collage of the covers of everything we're looking forward to, and a list of books that we might buy. And that brings us to a close. So that has been Ace Comicals episode number 28. You can find us on Facebook under Ace Comicals. You can find us on Twitter at Ace Comicals. You can find us everywhere, pretty much. If all social media, Instagram under Ace Comicals. You can find us. The hub for everything is our website, which is www.acecomicals.com. We're on WordPress, which is acecomicals.wordpress.com. We are on various different podcast apps or clients, or you can find us on iTunes under Ace Comicals. You can find us on Pocket Casts. You can find us on Stitcher. There's others that I always forget. Ray, where else can you find us?
Overcast, TuneIn, Castro.
Yes. You can find me on Twitter under @Batto. That's BATTOU. If you have any questions to ask, you can DM them to me on Twitter, or you can DM them to the Ace Comicals Twitter, or you can send them directly to acecomicals@gmail.com. Ray, where can we find you?
Same on Twitter at Monke, so that's at MOONKEH. And also, if you want to join me or any of us on Dragon Ball Fighters, we'll be on there as well. So we'll give links to that on our individual Twitter feeds.
And that's via Steam.
Yes, so, I've got it on Steam. Yeah.
Leon, where can we find you?
You can find me at Leon Everett on Twitter, and look out. I haven't got the date yet when it will be up, but I'll be guesting on the anime podcast Dynamite in the Brain fairly soon. So once that's up, links will be going out on my Twitter.
Which I should also mention I have done recently on an anime fighting game draft for those guys, which was, was pretty fun.
What have you guys been discussing with Dynamite in the Brain individually?
Oh, for me, it was the anime fighting game draft, which is the most recent one I've done. But there's previous episodes where I've been on where I've done discussions on Ghost in the Shell and things like that.
Okay. Leon?
Yeah, and the episode I'll be recording soon will be about the anime Venus Wars.
Cool. Okay.
Yes. So that has been Ace Comicals episode 28. Thanks for listening, guys. Ace Comicals, over and out.